Today I'm going to talk you through some different squat progressions because I often get asked about squats and what is the best type for somebody to be doing. So I'm going to start this off by saying there's not necessarily always a best type of squat or a best type of workout or any different type of exercise. But I really think squats are great, and this is why I want to talk you through some different progressions, as you will see these pop up throughout your programming. So first of all, I just want to touch on what is the point of doing squats, why are we doing them, and why do I think they are so beneficial for many different reasons. So if trained properly, they can reduce the risk of injury. This is because they are a compound movement. You're able to train stability with them. So we're looking at stability at the ankle, knee, hip, also core as well. And when we get through the progressions, you can also see that we can work on shoulder stability through the use of a squat as well. It increases your range of motion and your mobility. So mobility is the idea of combining strength and flexibility together. So if I can train both of those, then I'm going to also improve my mobility. It's functional. It's one of the ways that our bodies are supposed to move. If we think about young toddlers who are just learning to walk, or children, they quite often like to squat as they play with their toys, or as they move around, they will sit in a squat to rest, and it is a functional movement. That means that is how our body is supposed to move. It focuses on lower body strength mostly, but there's many other aspects that are great, especially again when we think about progressions and how we can progress squats. It doesn't only work your lower body because it's a functional movement, it's working things like your core and possibly even your shoulders as well when we get through the progressions of the squat. So we'll start with the air squat. I want to talk through the air squat first, and then we'll come to some squat help, because the air squat is not only a great exercise to be doing, but also a great assessment of where you're currently at and how you can improve some of the things that I talked about previously, such as stability and mobility. So if we look at my video here, we can see the different cues coming into play. So to start off with, we always want to think a slight hinge at the hip to initiate the movement. My knees track down over my midfoot or out over my toes. Although the main fault we often see with squats is heels coming up off the ground. And I'll go through in the next slide how you can help yourself out if you find that your knees fall in and your heels lift up off the ground. So you want to think heels down, knees out. However, this can be a tricky cue to follow if you do have any kind of range of motion issues. And chest up. Keep your torso and chest as upright as you can throughout the movement. This includes at the bottom of the squat. So the first one is the air squat. Now let's move on to some different ways that you can help yourself out if you find a squat difficult. Because you find a movement difficult doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. If you have any big pain problems, that's when perhaps you shouldn't be doing the movement. But just because you find it hard doesn't mean you should stop. It just means that we might need to make adaptations and also change what you're doing slightly so you can see progress over time. You can use weight plates under your heels or anything underneath your heels to elevate them. This opens up your ankle and your hip range slightly, so you will be able to get lower down in your squat whilst maintaining those positions that we talked about: chest up, knees out over toes. You can perform this banded as well to activate your glutes. So again, inactive glutes can be a cause of your knees falling in, as well as mobility issues. So banded squats, so putting a small band around your knees, can be really helpful and beneficial to help you out with your squats. Also squatting down to a target. If you really struggle with squats, then this is a really great place to start. Sitting down onto something first and standing back up. Trying not to sit all the way down, but to tap your bum on the seat, and you can then make it lower and lower over time as your mobility and your strength gets better. So these are some things that you can use to help you, and I've put them in here now as well because you could potentially use these with all the other squat variations that I'm going to go through. So we've gone through the air squat, which is body weight, no weights at all. The next one I want to go through, which could be done body weight to start off with, and then we could also eventually look to add weight, is the Cossack squat. I really like this one because it highlights issues that you may have at the hip and the ankle. It also gives you a really great stretch on the inner thigh. And if we look at the Cossack squat, it's like doing a half squat. So you're working on that single leg strength, which will then help you out with your full squat. Goblet squats. This would be a great progression as well. So it's exactly the same as the air squat, which is why I put the air squat first, because you'll notice all the cues on all the squats that I go through are the same. Chest up, knee out over midfoot or toe, and heel down. Same with the goblet squat. Once you are proficient with the air squat, then it can be a great place to start to add weight by using a kettlebell or a dumbbell, holding it in the goblet position. And again, you'll notice the same cues are in play over here. And because we've added weight, he's keeping his torso upright, even though he's added weight. That's when we can start to think about making sure that we're working on core as well as things like quads and glutes. You'll also notice in this video here, it does actually have lifters on, which if we come back to my slide about using weight plates or something to elevate your heels, helps you out with maintaining this nice upright position and knees out over toes when you're doing your squat. Once you're proficient with the goblet squat, I like to then move on to the front squat, especially for beginners. We don't necessarily always start off at the higher level. We want to have something in your program or your planning that is progressive, so you can see that progress over time and have things to aim towards. There's absolutely no reason why somebody who is more advanced shouldn't be doing a goblet squat, but when I'm thinking about working upwards, I try and work my way through progressions so that people aren't thrown off by doing something that they can't do to begin with because they're not familiar with these previous progressions that I've gone through. So the front squat would be next. Because as you can see, the position here is actually very similar to the goblet squat. However, this is when upper body mobility can come into play. When we think about the front rack position, you're going to need to have, you need to be mobile in the shoulders, and that also involves things like your chest and your lats, which could cause issues with the front rack position. There are different ways to hold the bar in your front rack position, but I always like to work towards being able to achieve this, because then that means that you've worked on your shoulder range of motion, your chest, your lats, and that's just going to help you in everyday life as well as with your training. So I like to still either come back to this once you've worked on a different way to front squat or some different types of squats, because it's a good indicator of how your mobility is coming along. After that, thinking about back squats. So generally when we're working with weights and as you progress through your weight training or strength training journey, you're going to want to lift slightly heavier, and the back squat does allow you to do this. Also, it is slightly easier to get into that back squat position, which might be a good option if you're finding the front rack position quite difficult. When we're thinking about front squats, these are more core and quad focused, whereas if I think about back squats, the load is on my back, so therefore it's going to work my posterior chain more, my glutes and my hamstrings more than it will do my core, because where I've got in my front squats, I've got the load placed on my front. Finally, I'm going to touch on the overhead squat, which is like the ultimate test of mobility and strength for your full body. So as you can see here in both examples, you've got your arms locked out overhead, which requires great strength and stability in both your shoulder, your core, your hips, ankles. So it is a real full body exercise, and you do need to have the mobility in order to perform this well, which is a great thing to aim towards. But just because you can't do this, again, doesn't mean you shouldn't work it. You might work it in different ways, for example, with dumbbells, or use some of those adaptations that I mentioned at the beginning. So, when are they used? Again, that's one of those it depends answers. It depends on what your goals are. But I've used all of these different types of squats with many different types of people, whether their goal is for weight loss, because strength training is excellent to lose body fat and also to build muscle. All of them improve the way you move, and all of them also build strength, but it depends on where you are then in your fitness journey. For example, if you are just starting out, the perfect place would be to start with the bodyweight squats. However, if you are more sport specific and you want to work on things like your range of motion overhead, perhaps you play a sport that requires you to be strong overhead, such as climbing or any kind of Olympic lifting, or any sport where you need to have your arms overhead. Things like this, working on your overhead mobility and strength with the overhead squat might be useful. So it's one of those answers that it depends, but all of these I think can be used at some point in your fitness journey, no matter what your goals are. So I will just want to finish up with some more squat help, because I know a lot of people struggle with this, and I also know lots of my clients, when they first come to me, also struggle with this. So some nice beginner exercises or stretches that you can add in are this wall straddle position. So stretching out your hips is really great for your squats, but this one is quite nice because you kind of let gravity do the work and let gravity pull your legs down. You want to think that your bum needs to be right up against the wall here, and just you want straight legs ideally, but if you struggle to get your legs straight to start off with, start with bent knees, and then you can work towards getting your legs straight. I mentioned the Cossack squat earlier. If you struggle with that, a great place to start here is using a PVC pipe, or maybe the wall, or you could even hold on to the rig here if you've got something to hold on to help you into that position, so then you can really focus on those cues that I talked about earlier. So we've touched on hips. Cossack squat will work hips, ankles, and also torso position, but then downward facing dog is a really great stretch for your ankles. It also stretches out overhead if you're looking to work towards overhead squats, but ankles are a really great focus for downward facing dog. Again, your legs don't have to be straight to begin with. Your heels do not have to touch the floor. In downward facing dog, you want to think about pulling your hips up towards the ceiling and pulling your heels down towards the floor, so you feel a big hamstring and calf stretch here. Another great thing to do can be, if you want this to be an active stretch, you can bend and straighten one leg at a time, really focusing on just pulling that one heel, the action of it pulling down towards the ground, so that you feel a stretch. You don't have to have both heels down on the ground for this to be a successful stretch. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I will speak to you soon.